Hey, welcome to Spectral Echoes, a collection of Reddit stories as told by people high as a kite. But it's Reddit, who knows, right? If you like the video, don't forget to like and subscribe, so you don't miss out on these awesome horror stories. Now, let's get started.
Have you ever had that moment? A soft melody that just plays when you're alone, and no one else hears it? Don't sing along.
It all started on a perfectly normal winter evening. It was raining lightly, the wind blew steadily outside the window, and I was curled up in my small rented room under a thick blanket, half reading a novel I'd borrowed from the library earlier in the week. My room was warm, quiet enough to hear the rustle of pages as I turned them or the drip of water from a leaky faucet in the kitchen. I always found nights like that pleasant, because the rain meant fewer people out, less noise, no motorbikes, no one calling to hang out. It was just me and my book, with a cool cup of tea by the window, and an evening I thought was perfect for not thinking about anything more. Until I heard someone singing. At first, I didn't pay much attention to it because the sound was very faint, as if echoing from somewhere outside through a window crack or from someone's house playing music not too loudly. Just a few simple notes, a melody that seemed familiar but I couldn't place what song it was. I even whistled along for a few beats, just like people unconsciously do when they hear a pleasant tune. It was just a brief moment, nothing special. I didn't even remember the lyrics. But the next day, as I was brushing my teeth, I heard that singing again. This time, it wasn't coming from the window, but seemed to be from the kitchen, where I'd turned off the light less than a minute before. I stopped, trying to listen, and found I couldn't pinpoint exactly where the sound was coming from, only that it wasn't outside anymore. There was no background music, no wind, no sign at all that it was a sound from a neighbor or a glitching electronic device. I checked my Bluetooth speaker, it was off. The TV wasn't on either. My phone was on my bed, not connected to any devices. I reassured myself that maybe a neighbor was showering and playing music, the sound echoing through the drainage system or thin walls. I'd heard the washing machine from next door before and thought it was rats in the ceiling. I slept that night, but not deeply. At one point, I woke up in the middle of the night, not because of any specific sound, just found myself awake and lying there listening for anything unusual. I remember turning on my nightlight, lying there for quite a while without understanding why I woke up. For a few minutes, I thought I heard something from the window, like breathing or something even softer than the rain. Then I fell back asleep. A week later, that singing appeared more frequently. I started hearing it when I was changing clothes, leaving the bathroom, or just as I lay down in bed, just a few notes, not perfectly formed, no clear words, as if someone was humming at the lowest possible volume. Still that same melody, still that feeling of having heard it somewhere before but unable to name it, like a background score of a memory I never truly remembered. I tried to find out what song it was. I repeated the melody in my head, used an app to identify music, tried tapping it out on my computer by rhythm, but no results came up. Maybe I misremembered the notes, or simply, they were just a few disconnected notes that didn't belong to any song. I started to doubt myself. Maybe I was stressed from all the work deadlines recently, or maybe it was because I'd lived alone for too long. All the times I heard it were brief, not too clear, and had no witnesses, so anything was possible. I told my best friend, and she said I must be sleepwalking or hearing things. I almost believed her. Until one night, I was standing in front of the mirror, brushing my hair after a shower. The door was closed, my phone was charging by the bed, and I knew for a fact there was no one else in the house but me. As I bent down to wring out my hair, I heard that sound again, clear, close, steady, as if someone was standing right behind me, singing softly into my ear. I straightened up with a jolt, turned around. No one. The mirror reflected an empty room, the white light a bit harsh. I turned again, nothing. I took a few steps back, standing silently. And then, I suddenly realized, my mouth was closed, not moving, but the sound was still there. Not from the next room, not from my phone, but as if it was coming from somewhere inside my own chest, as if there was a layer of sound echoing in my head, but it wasn't a thought. I didn't feel like I was singing, but that melody was still coming out, even though I was standing still, doing nothing. I turned off all the lights, sat back on my bed, trying to recall every detail. But everything was too vague. Nothing concrete to confirm it was strange. Everything could be explained: wind noise, echoes, nervous tension, auditory hallucinations. But there was also a possibility that it wasn't. I continued to stay in that house. I didn't think there was any reason to move just because of a tune. But from then on, I never whistled along again. Once, as I was making coffee, I unconsciously hummed that melody, just a few simple notes. And immediately after, like a reflex, it echoed right behind me, so close I could feel every breath. I held my breath for several seconds, not daring to turn around. Not because I was afraid of anything specific, but because I was afraid I would see nothing at all. I started to think, perhaps the scary thing isn't that something is here, but that if there's nothing at all, then I'd have to accept that I'm the one creating those sounds. And if I wasn't doing it intentionally, then how much control did I truly have over myself? I don't tell this story to anyone anymore, because I don't even believe myself. I started limiting my time alone at home in the evenings. I came home later, tried to go out more, letting the city noise fill the quietness I once loved so much. I kept music playing constantly, left the lights on in my room, so I wouldn't have a chance to notice any strange sounds again. But one night, as I was listening to a podcast and drifted off, I dreamed I was walking down a small alley, between two rows of houses with no lights. No one around, just me walking. I kept walking until I heard that familiar singing coming from ahead. I looked up and saw myself, standing at the end of the alley, back turned, singing that melody non-stop, without a break. I woke up in the middle of the night, my heart pounding and my whole body covered in sweat. After that, I moved out of the rented room and went to live with my parents. I also deleted all music recognition apps, cleared playlists with sad songs, and forbade myself from humming any tunes anymore. I didn't want to accidentally hum along with something I didn't understand.
Sound in unplugged headphones.
I've been a sound engineer for almost 6 years, used to night shifts, to adjusting mics in empty studios. The quieter it is, the more productive I am. Sometimes I even prefer it to daytime. Because everything's off, no one bothers me, just the hum of equipment and the sound of my own breathing. One time I was on a night shift alone. Nothing was turned on in the studio, and my headphones weren't connected to any sound source. I was checking some things when suddenly a sound bite played in my headphones. It wasn't static, not background noise, but a short vocal part, like a lullaby, a female voice, smooth and with a soft breath. I immediately thought of interference, that my headphones had picked up a signal from some external device. I took off my headphones, checked the connections, but everything was as it should be. No input, no other signals. I made a note of it, planning to check again with the technical manager in the morning. But then on the second night, it appeared again, the same vocal part, when I was reopening an old project to check it. This time I hesitated a bit, because the room was still empty, the yellow light was soft, and the monitor speakers were off. I tried turning on record mode, but when I played it back, the recording was completely blank, just white noise. I didn't think too much of it. Maybe it was an auditory hallucination. I'd heard that working with sound too much could cause that, especially at night, when your ears are more sensitive than usual. But on the third night, I was at home, taking a late shower after my shift, and the singing came back, not through headphones, not through speakers, but as if from inside me, soft and persistent, just enough for me to stop mid-action and turn around. I saw nothing. The bathroom only had cold white light, a towel hanging in the corner, a wet floor, and a closed window. I turned the water on full blast. The rushing water drowned everything out. But when I turned off the water, the melody was still there, as if it had never stopped. That's when I started to doubt myself. I didn't tell anyone because I felt that telling it would only make it more real, as if I was confirming to myself that something was wrong. But in the following days, that singing kept coming back. Not often, but always the same segment. No clear words, just a humming melody, familiar to the point of being unsettling, like someone was trying to make me remember something. But I didn't know what it was. I tried recording it with my phone. Sometimes I'd record right after I heard it, when the sound was still echoing in my ears. But every playback was empty. I used a high-quality mic, connected it to a sound wave analyzer to cut frequencies. Still flatline. Technically, I knew that sound had never existed. I started to feel more tired working night shifts. Small sounds distracted me. I no longer trusted my ears as I used to. One day, I was organizing files when I suddenly realized I was humming a tune, very similar to the one I heard in my head. I wasn't intentionally singing, it just came out like a habit, like a reflex. That's when I truly started to worry, not because of the sound itself, but because of me. I began to consider the possibility that I was having psychological issues, maybe due to work pressure, lack of sleep, too much exposure to sound, or worse, some kind of disorder. I went to an ENT doctor first, but my ears were completely normal. No damage, no inflammation, no interference. They asked if I often had insomnia or if I had ever experienced any acoustic trauma. I shook my head because actually I was still eating and sleeping fine. It was just that my sleep was frequently interrupted by the feeling that something was waiting for me to open my eyes for it to start. One evening, I opened my music writing software and tried to recreate the melody. I didn't remember every note precisely, but the tune was still lingering. So I tried to play it back. When I played it, the melody matched what I heard in my head by almost 90%. No one else could confirm it, but I knew. That was the first time I clearly heard it outside my head without using headphones. I saved that file, naming it test01.mid, but a few days later, when I went back, the file was gone. I checked the folder, no saved version. I also couldn't remember if I had definitely hit save or not. At that point, I started thinking again, maybe I hadn't actually done that, but just imagined I did. Just like I imagined I didn't hear anything and then heard it in my head. In the sound industry, mishearing things, auditory illusions, and interference are perfectly normal. But this feeling was different. It didn't come suddenly, its source wasn't clear, but it had a regularity, like a repeated signal, not strong but very stable. I tried turning off all electronic devices, moved my phone to another room, but the singing still came when I sat alone in a dark room. No sound, no devices. I tried using noise-canceling headphones, but the strange thing was the singing wasn't drowned out. It felt like it wasn't coming from outside, but from within, like a heartbeat or blood flowing. Something you can't turn off no matter what headphones you wear. I slowly got used to it. Sometimes I even sat and listened to see if today was like yesterday, if the melody changed, but nothing changed. It was still the same gentle hum, still a thin timbre. Not a specific fear, just a feeling of being bound. Like someone standing behind you, silent, waiting for you to turn around and acknowledge their presence. Recently, I finally talked about this with a friend who's a medical student. My friend didn't react much, just asked if I had experienced prolonged stress, or if I'd ever had auditory hallucinations or sleep disorders. My friend said sometimes there are phantom sound like auditory memories. A piece of music heard repeatedly for too long can become deeply etched in the brain and can replay without external stimulation. I want to believe that because it makes sense. I don't think anything serious is wrong with me, but I'm not sure anymore. I don't try to chase away that singing anymore. But I also don't sing along. Only occasionally when I'm not paying attention, I find my mouth moving to that exact part, that exact melody, that exact rhythm, like a never-recorded composition that always exists somewhere in my head. And the most unsettling thing is that to this day, I still don't know where that melody came from. But every time I hear it, it's always the same, like a demo that's never finished, but never turns off.
Moving house. Still no escape.
I used to think that just moving house would solve everything, that the annoying things clinging to me would be left behind, that simply leaving a noisy, cramped place would allow me to start over with a quieter, more pleasant life. After almost a year living in an old rental room, where every day I'd hear people arguing, doors slamming, and motorbikes starting up from 5 in the morning, I decided to move to a high-floor apartment. It wasn't a luxury condo, but at least it offered the privacy I needed. It was a small, pretty room on the 11th floor of an old building, overlooking the city in the distance. Not too spacious, but with enough light, enough breeze, and especially enough quiet that I felt like I was living a different life. The first night, I opened the window slightly to let the wind in, turned on a soft yellow nightlight, and lay listening to the faint sounds echoing from the city. Distant car horns, the wind rustling through low trees. It all made me feel strangely relieved and comfortable. But that feeling didn't last long. I don't remember the exact time, just that I had been lying there for a while, not quite asleep, eyes half closed, my mind drifting through vague thoughts, when suddenly I heard a very soft sound, like someone humming faintly. Just a short part, no clear words, just a steady, very thin hum, like wind whistling through a crack, or someone gently whistling, intentionally keeping the sound very low. At first, I thought I misheard. Maybe it was really the wind or a neighbor on the floor above playing music, and I accidentally caught some sound wave. I didn't pay much attention, just lay still and breathed evenly, waiting for the sound to disappear. And just as I hoped, it did. I fell asleep without knowing when, waking up the next morning with a vague feeling as if nothing had happened. But the next night, around the same time, the humming came back. This time it was a bit clearer, not loud, not harsh, just a hum, like someone humming to lull themselves to sleep. No words, just a faint, steady echo like a heartbeat, sometimes far, sometimes near, as if echoing from somewhere behind the wall. I sat up, turned off the nightlight, and stood still in the dark, tried to pinpoint where the sound was coming from. But the room was completely silent. No sound at all except the wind outside the window. This went on for several nights. The humming always appeared an almost fixed time, not long, but enough to wake me up completely. I started checking the room more carefully, looking for any cracks that might cause the wind to make strange sounds. Tried closing the window tightly, checked the air conditioning system, even the exhaust vent in the bathroom, but everything was normal. I started to feel uncomfortable, not out of fear, but because it brought an inexplicably familiar feeling, as if I had heard that humming somewhere before, but couldn't remember where. It didn't sound like any song I'd ever heard, but every time the hum echoed, I felt like I knew exactly which note it would go to, like a piece of music buried deep in my memory since I was very young. No one taught it. No one sang it. It was just there. I don't know since when. I tried recording with my phone at night, placing it close to my bedside, setting the sensitivity to the highest, hoping I could capture that strange humming. The next morning when I checked, the recording file was completely empty. Not a single sound, only the faint sound of my own breathing. And at the end of the segment, a prolonged silence. But just as I was about to turn off the recording, I heard a very small, very faint laugh, like someone standing right next to me, laughing softly right behind my neck. I wasn't sure if it was a real laugh or just the wind or static, but the immediate chill down my spine made me not dare to listen a second time. I deleted the file, then told myself I was probably just being too sensitive due to the change in living environment. I decided to move out after 2 months there. To my friends, they said it was because the place was too far from work. But in truth, every night I stayed awake until almost dawn, just waiting for that humming to appear and trying to convince myself that it would disappear. But it didn't disappear. Instead, sometimes it hummed longer, some nights shorter. Some nights it echoed many times in a row, as if it also had emotions, a mood, sometimes enthusiastic, sometimes silent, sometimes hurried, and sometimes as if intentionally prolonging itself. I moved to another rental, in a crowded neighborhood, noisy and lit up all night. But just a week later, as I was lying down reading, the humming came back, this time not from behind the wall, but from the ceiling. I got up, walked around the room, listening intently, but it seemed to follow me, no longer coming from a fixed spot. I started to feel tired, slept poorly, couldn't focus at work, always in a state of anxiety. I went to an ENT doctor, had hearing tests, found nothing unusual. Then I went to a psychologist, recounted the story, which even I felt awkward telling. But the doctor just said I showed no signs of auditory hallucinations or paranoia. I didn't know whether to be happy or sad with that conclusion, because if I wasn't sick, then why did I still hear that humming every night? No matter what rental I was in, no matter if I was on a distant business trip, even when I stayed at a beachfront hotel for a short trip, it still echoed. In fact, one afternoon when I had just returned from a walk, sitting by the window watching the rain, I heard it clearly echoing in my head, no longer from outside, but like a thought springing forth on its own, like a memory coming alive. It wasn't someone else singing, but it was me singing without realizing it. I tried to live normally, tried to act as if it didn't exist, continued working, meeting friends, eating well, and exercising regularly. But at night, when I turned off the lights to sleep, that segment returned. Always at no words, no name, no origin. Just repeating like a lullaby from childhood that no one ever taught me. Yet I knew it uncannily well. And what tired me out the most wasn't the humming itself, but the fact that no one believed me. No one had ever heard it like I had, and I wasn't even sure if something was truly there or if my own mind was playing tricks on me. But I've grown used to living with it, used to an invisible companion that waits until the city sleeps to softly begin. And I just hope, whatever it is, that it only stays there, a wordless, faceless, nameless hum, and doesn't come any closer.
The singing in the train car.
My commute to work is about an hour and a half by train, and due to the nature of my job often requiring overtime, I mostly come home on the last train of the day. The train is often empty, and the car isn't crowded. Some days there are only a few scattered passengers, the rest being empty seats and the soft sound of wind blowing through the sealed gaps in the doors. I'm not the type to be afraid of darkness or quiet spaces. In fact, sitting alone in a cold train car at night makes me feel truly peaceful. It's a kind of solitude just enough for my mind to rest. No need to listen to anyone talk. No need to greet or force a smile with colleagues. Usually, I'd put on my headphones, play a gentle playlist, and lean my head against the window, sometimes dozing off until I woke up near my station. I don't remember exactly when it started, but one evening, half awake, half asleep, I heard a very soft, faint humming, like someone singing a lullaby somewhere. It wasn't very clear words, just a steady, thin hum, like wind whistling through a crack, or someone gently whistling, intentionally keeping the sound very low. At first, I thought it was from my headphones. Maybe a song in my playlist had a background hum like that, or a recording had some human voice mixed in. But when I took off my headphones, holding them close to my ear to check, I found that the headphones weren't playing music anymore. The song had stopped. I could still hear the singing, not loud, not clear, just a steady, soft hum echoing as if from behind me. I turned my head to look and saw the train car behind me was empty, no one standing or sitting there. Since it was still early, not yet my station, I decided to get up and walk through the connecting door to see if anyone was sitting there or playing music. When I pushed the door open and stepped through, I realized there was no one there at all. The seats were neatly upright, no light from a phone, no murmuring, completely empty. I looked around, even crouched down to check under the long benches against the car wall, but still saw nothing. I went back to my seat, and a moment later, after sitting down, eyes half closed, the singing returned. This time it was clearer, as if right above my head. I couldn't tell if it was a male or female voice, just a steady hum, like someone humming to lull themselves or just warbling without thinking anyone was listening. I started to feel uneasy, not because I was scared, but because it didn't make sense. There was no one in the car, my headphones weren't on, no speakers nearby, and even if I suspected interference from the train's sound system, the fact that it only appeared when I was sitting alone made me unsettled. I started paying closer attention on subsequent days. Some days I sat near other groups of people, and with the sound of their conversations, nothing seemed unusual. But whenever I rode alone, especially when the train car was empty, that singing would return. Not immediately, but only a few minutes after I sat down, silent and relaxed. It was as if it waited for me to be tired enough, distracted enough, before quietly creeping in. Sometimes I tried to record it with my phone, setting a timer to record throughout the trip. The next morning when I checked, all I heard was the sound of the train wheels rolling, the faint screech of brakes, and no singing like I had heard. I started to feel annoyed with myself. Not just on the train, a few days later, I started hearing that humming even in enclosed, small, and quiet places. In the elevator at work, when I was alone, when the lights flickered slightly and no one was standing next to me. In the bathroom at night when only a few people were left in the office. There was even one time I heard it right in a taxi, when the driver didn't have music on, the windows were fully rolled up, and the car was silent like a box floating through the night city. The sound was still the same, not rushed, not urgent, not sad, not joyful, just deep, steady hums, sometimes extended, sometimes abruptly cut short, then repeating an old segment, like someone practicing singing in their head but not making a sound. I told a friend about it, just casually, not using creepy or strange words, just saying I kept hearing a repeating melody in my head. He laughed and said I was probably stressed, maybe my ears were tired or I was sensitive to sounds, and that people who work night shifts often experience those kinds of symptoms. I didn't argue, because actually, I thought the same thing. I bought brain supplements, exercised more, tried to sleep earlier, and turned off all electronic devices an hour before bed. But it didn't stop. One time, I tried letting my friend listen through my headphones, right when the sound was appearing. I said, "Listen, do you hear anything?" He put them on, then took them off, shaking his head and saying, "I don't hear anything at all, just a slight wind noise." At that point, I didn't know what else to say, because I could still hear the singing while he couldn't. It didn't feel like an auditory hallucination, not like a dream, because I was fully awake, my mind clear, yet I couldn't break free from that repeating melody. And then, one night, as I was dozing off in the train car, my head slightly tilted towards the window, the wind outside gently blowing through the unsealed crack in the glass, the familiar soft rumble of metal wheels grinding on the tracks, I was woken up by a very close sound right next to my ear, as if someone was singing right next to me. I jolted up, opened my eyes, and saw the train car was still empty. But something was wrong. I realized my mouth was moving. I was singing. Not in a clear voice, but the sound was distinctly coming from my throat, a melody identical to what I had been hearing for weeks. I fell silent, put my hand to my throat, feeling a clear vibration, as if I had been the one singing all along without ever realizing it. I looked around again. The car was still deserted. No one cared. No one noticed. Only me, and the feeling that I was gradually being taken over by some nameless tune, like a habit creeping into my sleep, into the quiet moments when I was unprepared. I don't dare tell this story to anyone anymore. Maybe I'm just scaring myself. Maybe it's just a mild disorder that will go away in a few weeks, or maybe it's because those long night commutes have made my mind create something to fill the invisible void. But since that day, I always wear headphones whenever I get on the train, playing any song, it doesn't matter which one, as long as it has lyrics, real human voices, so that humming sound has no room to intrude anymore. Because I'm afraid, if I sing it one more time, I'll know the whole song. And then, perhaps, I won't be able to stop.
The melody no one taught.
At that time, I was working remotely on a branding design project. It was freelance work from home, with continuous deadlines, so I barely left my room for weeks. My eating and sleeping patterns were erratic. Sometimes I'd work until 3 in the morning, then wake up near noon the next day, and return to my desk as if it were a thoughtless routine. My computer desk was right by the window, but the curtains were always drawn because bright light easily gave me headaches. The fan hummed steadily, and my Bluetooth speaker played soft, soothing music. Most of the time, I was just within those 4 walls, my mind always running on 2 parallel tracks. One was the design I was working on, and the other was random, disjointed thoughts. I have no musical talent, play no instruments, and can't even remember the full lyrics to any song. But for about a month now, I've noticed myself unconsciously humming a short melody, just a few seconds long, without words, just a faint tune like a transition between 2 parts of some song. At first, I thought I must have heard it somewhere, an advertisement, a video, or some game background music, because in the creative industry, it's not unusual for the brain to retain sounds. But when I tried to find it, using music recognition apps, recording the melody to search, even typing it into an AI song identification tool, I found nothing. I didn't pay much attention to it. Maybe it was an old tune, maybe I remembered it wrong or patched it together from multiple sources. But then, I started humming that part more frequently. Every time I washed my face, made coffee, or got things from the fridge, without realizing when, I started singing the connecting parts, not very long, but clearer, as if I was slowly learning a song. What startled me was that I never tried to learn it. It came very naturally. I didn't need to think about what the next note would be. I just sang and knew how to sing it, where the voice should go up, where it should go down, how long to hold my breath to sustain the last note. It was like someone was sitting somewhere, teaching me without words. I started to feel a bit strange. Because that melody had no clear origin, no one taught it, no one sang it with me, and I didn't remember ever hearing anyone sing like that before. I tried singing it to my best friend over the phone. She laughed, saying it sounded like old Japanese game music, like a lullaby. But no one recognized what song it was. Not a single part of the song I hummed could be linked to any famous melody I knew. I started to feel uncomfortable with myself, because the more I learned it, the deeper that melody stuck in my head. Every morning when I woke up, I almost heard it in my head even before opening my eyes. Then one day, I was standing in the kitchen, stirring coffee, humming the tune as usual, when my mother walked by. She paused, tilted her head to listen, then said something I'll never forget. My mother said, "That tune sounds familiar. I think I heard it when I was little, from your grandmother, back when she started mumbling and laughing to herself." I turned to ask, "Are you sure, Mom? Which song?" My mother frowned, said she wasn't sure, just that this melody made her uncomfortable, like it was linked to some vague memory she didn't want to recall. I had never met my grandmother. She passed away before I was born. In her final years, she showed signs of severe dementia, often sitting alone talking to someone who wasn't there, but everyone in the family thought it was just normal symptoms of old age. I never paid attention to that until my mother said the melody I was singing was like something my grandmother used to hum, even though no one remembered what song it was. That evening, I tried recording my singing voice with my phone, just to see if I was really singing new parts on my own. I turned on record mode, placed it near my mouth, and sang as usual for about 2 minutes, then saved the file and sent it to a friend who's a producer, asking him to listen and tell me what genre it sounded like. The audio file I sent didn't get any special feedback. My friend said it sounded strange, a bit old-fashioned, like folk music mixed with lo-fi. He figured I was probably just too immersed in old music and creating it myself. But when I played back the recording that evening, sitting alone in my room, turning up the volume, wearing headphones for clarity, I realized there were two voices. One was my voice, clear and distinct, with my characteristic breathing. But there was another voice, smaller, thinner, as if on a lower sound layer underneath, like an echo from the back of my throat that didn't pass through my mouth. It sounded like a backing vocal accompanying me in every phrase. That voice wasn't necessarily female, but it was delicate, like a breath of wind gliding over the tongue, steady and light, but clearly not an overlay recording due to equipment. Because I tried recording many times after that, and each time that voice layer was in the background, no matter if I changed microphones, changed apps, or even changed the recording space. I didn't dare listen to it a second time in the same night. I turned off all devices, drew the curtains, turned off the night light, lay still under my blanket, and tried not to think anymore. But the harder I tried to forget, the more that melody repeated in my head like an unturned-offable background song. I started not singing anymore. I tried to avoid any action that might lead to me spontaneously making that sound. I didn't hum, didn't tap my fingers to the rhythm, didn't allow myself to relax when working alone. But it didn't stop. Some days I'd be watching a video, listening to a simple drawing tutorial clip, or a video analyzing colors. While I was focused, I'd suddenly hear that melody fleetingly in the background, very faint, almost blended with the sound of the fan or mouse clicks, but I heard it, I recognized it immediately. Sometimes, while watching TV with my mother, an advertisement for laundry detergent or a voiceless movie scene, I'd still catch a few notes in the background music. I knew it wasn't a real sound. I knew my brain might be reconstructing familiar sounds in the empty spaces, like people with headaches who hear background noise that no one else hears. But I couldn't explain why it was always in the right rhythm, always the right structure, and never a single note off. I once thought I was sick. I went to a psychologist, saying I heard a repeating melody even though it wasn't coming from anywhere. The doctor said it could be due to work pressure, or prolonged work cycles in a confined space causing my brain to react by recreating sounds to fill the excessive silence. They said there were no signs of auditory hallucinations, no symptoms of paranoia. I was healthy, I just needed more rest, sufficient food, and more exercise. I followed their advice. I walked every morning, listened to podcasts, listened to completely new playlists, no lyrics, no catchy melodies. I blocked out all old sounds from my ears. But in the quietest moments, when the tap water ran, when I stood waiting for the elevator, when I walked through a long corridor and only heard my own footsteps, I still heard that melody echoing like a breath in my mind. I could hear it without opening my mouth. To this day, I still live normally, still work, still sleep, still eat and meet friends. But I no longer sing, and I don't want anyone to sing with me. Because in one of the times I listened closely to that recording, I heard a very faint, soft click, like someone softly laughing at the bottom of my voice. And from that moment, I was no longer sure if my voice was truly my own.
If you like the video, don't forget to like and subscribe, so you don't miss out on these awesome horror stories.